I have given this world 75 years. I gave my children my sleepless nights, my savings, my silence, and my strength. I gave my spouse my youth. I gave my job my sharpest hours. And one morning, sitting alone with my tea gone cold, I asked myself a question that cracked me open like thunder. After all that giving, what is actually mine? You know, when I turned 70, someone handed me a card that said, "Age is just a number." I smiled. I nodded. But deep inside I thought, no, it is not just a number. 75 years is a library. It is a weight. It is a long, winding road with more behind you than ahead. And somewhere along that road, I made a decision that changed the way I breathe every single morning. I stopped letting other people own my time. Now, that might sound simple. It might even sound selfish to some of you. But let me tell you what happens to a man who spends his whole life handing his hours away like loose change. He wakes up one day, older, quieter, slower, and he realizes that everyone he gave his time to has moved on. His children have their own mornings now. His grandchildren are busy growing up. The world kept spinning, and he spent so many of his revolutions waiting for someone to tell him it was finally his turn. I waited a long time for my turn. At 75, I stopped waiting. There is something nobody prepares you for when you get to this age. The realization that time does not feel the same anymore. When you are 30, a wasted afternoon means nothing. You will have 10,000 more. But when you are where I am standing right now, you feel every hour differently. You hold it. You look at it. You ask yourself, is this how I want to spend what I have left? And I began saying no, kindly but clearly. No to the obligations that drain without filling. No to the gatherings I attend only out of guilt. No to spending my Tuesday afternoons in worry about things I cannot change. Because here is the truth. I wish someone had told me 40 years ago. The people who love you will respect your time when you start respecting it yourself. Now I have a garden I visit every morning. I have a chair by the window where I sit without explanation. I read. I think. Sometimes I do nothing at all, and I have learned that nothing, done intentionally, is one of the most powerful things a man can do. My time is no longer a donation. It is a decision, and every day I choose to spend it on what is real, what is quiet, and what is mine. I feel more alive than I did in decades of rushing. If this truth speaks to you, stay with me, because there is so much more ahead. And don't forget to subscribe to Evergreen Wisdom, where every word is grown for the season you're living in right now. I want to tell you something that took me most of my life to understand. Something I wish I had learned at 40 or even 50 instead of carrying the weight of it all the way to 75. For most of my years, I confused keeping peace with keeping quiet. Every time there was tension at the dinner table, I swallowed my words. Every time someone said something that sat wrong in my chest, I let it sit there. And I smiled anyway. I told myself this was wisdom. I told myself this was what a good father does, what a steady man does. You absorb. You endure. You keep the room comfortable even when you are quietly falling apart inside it. But here is what nobody tells you about swallowing things for too long. They do not disappear. They settle. They pile up, layer by layer, year by year, until the man standing in the mirror one morning is hollowed out in places he cannot even name. I looked at that man, and I barely recognized him. That was the moment I understood. I had been protecting everyone else's peace while quietly destroying my own. At this age, I no longer have the luxury of erosion. I do not say that with bitterness. I say it with the kind of calm that only comes after you have finally seen the truth clearly. When you are 75, your reserves are different. Your energy is more honest. Your patience, though deepened by experience, is no longer bottomless. And that is not a weakness. That is wisdom wearing a different coat. Protecting my peace now means I choose my conversations carefully. It means I walk away from arguments that have no destination. It means I no longer sit in rooms that make me feel invisible just to avoid someone's discomfort. Because a man who has no stillness left inside him, no quiet center, has nothing real to offer the people he loves. You cannot pour from a cup you have spent a lifetime refusing to refill. My children sometimes say I have become more particular in my old age. And they are right. I have become particular about what I let near my spirit. Not because I care less about the people around me, but because I have finally started caring about myself with the same sincerity I gave everyone else for decades. Peace, real peace, is not the absence of noise around you. It is the presence of something unshakable within you, and at 75, that is the one thing I guard with everything I have left. There is a version of me my children know very well. They know the man who stood at the head of the table, the one who fixed things when they broke, who showed up when it mattered, who held the family together through storms they never even knew were happening. They know the father who never cried in front of them, the provider who always had an answer, the strong one, because that was the role, and I played it faithfully for more years than I can count. But that is not the whole story. That is only the chapter they were allowed to read. There is a boy buried somewhere inside this 75-year-old body who was terrified once, who made choices he regretted before the sun rose the next morning, who loved people he never told, who lost things he never fully grieved, who stood at crossroads so dark and so quiet that the silence itself felt like a decision. My children did not see those moments. The world did not see them. I folded them up neatly and tucked them somewhere deep, the way men of my generation were taught to do. And for a long time, I believed that keeping those parts hidden was a form of strength. Now I know better. Your story, your full, unpolished, unedited story, does not belong to the image people have built of you. It does not belong to the version of you that made everyone comfortable. It belongs entirely and completely to you. And there is something quietly devastating about a man who carries his whole truth to the grave without ever once letting it breathe. I have started letting mine breathe, not loudly, not as confession, but as conversation, with my grandchildren, who look at me with eyes that are still open to everything, with old friends who carry their own unspoken chapters, sometimes just with myself in the early morning, before the world wakes up and asks me to be presentable again. I revisit the parts of my life I once ran from, and instead of shame, I find something unexpected waiting there, understanding, compassion, even gratitude for the man who survived what he survived. Because here is what I have come to believe with everything in me. The greatest thing I can leave behind is not money in an account or a name carved somewhere permanent. It is the truth of a life fully lived and honestly told. That is the inheritance that actually changes people. That is the story worth passing down. Your life is not a highlight reel. It is a whole, breathing, complicated, beautiful human document. And it belongs to no one but you. I want you to think about something for a moment. Think about everything this body of yours has carried. Every early morning it pulled itself out of bed before it was ready. Every late night it kept going when the exhaustion had long since passed reasonable. Every grief it absorbed, every anxiety it held in the chest like a stone, every physical demand you placed on it without so much as a thank you. Just an expectation, just another day of pushing through. I did that for most of my life. I treated this body like a workhorse, like a machine that existed purely in service of everything and everyone around it. When it ached, I ignored it. When it asked for rest, I negotiated with it. When it sent quiet signals that something was wrong, I turned the volume down and kept moving because there were things to do, people depending on me, a life that did not pause for discomfort. And for a long time, I was proud of that. I called it toughness. At 75, I have a different name for it. I call it the longest apology I am still making. Because this body never abandoned me, not once. Through every hard season, every impossible year, every morning I was not sure I had enough left to face the day. It showed up, quietly, faithfully, without complaint. It carried my children when they were small. It worked through pain I never admitted to anyone. It brought me all the way here to this moment, still breathing, still standing, still capable of feeling the sun on my face on a slow afternoon. The least it deserves now is my attention. So I walk in the mornings, not fast, not to prove anything, just to move through the world gently and feel grateful that I still can. I eat with more care than I did at 40, not out of fear, but out of respect. I sleep without guilt now, because I have finally accepted that rest is not laziness. It is loyalty to the only home I will ever truly live in. And I listen. That is the biggest change. When something aches, I pay attention instead of pushing past it. When my body says slow down, I slow down. It has earned that honesty from me. After 75 years of service without complaint, the very least I can offer in return is the courtesy of being heard. Your body is not a burden reaching this age. It is a companion that has outlasted every storm you thought would finish you. Treat it accordingly. Treat it like the faithful, irreplaceable friend it has always silently been. I spent a very long time making myself easier to agree with. I would start a sentence with conviction and finish it with a question mark. I would share an opinion and then immediately soften it the moment I sensed the slightest resistance in the room. I became fluent in a language I was never proud of, the language of shrinking, of hedging, of saying what I truly believed in such a careful, diluted way that by the time it reached the other person, it carried almost none of its original weight. And I told myself, this was tact. I told myself this was emotional intelligence. What it actually was, if I am being honest with myself at 75, was fear dressed up in polite clothing. Fear of being dismissed. Fear of starting conflict. Fear that if I stood too firmly in what I believed, the people around me might find me difficult, might pull away, might decide I was no longer worth the patience. So I made myself agreeable. I made myself convenient. And in doing so, I slowly made myself invisible. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from never being truly known, from sitting in a room full of people who love the version of you that you have carefully constructed for their comfort, and realizing that the real you, with all his sharp edges and hard-won convictions, has never once been fully let into that room. I know that loneliness. I lived inside it for decades. But here is what 75 years of living deposits into a man, if he pays attention. It deposits evidence, mountains of it, evidence of what is true and what is hollow, evidence of which values actually hold when life applies pressure and which ones were only ever decorative. I have watched ideologies collapse. I have seen confident people proven wrong. I have outlived certainties that once felt unshakable. And through all of that watching and living and losing and learning, I have formed a perspective that belongs entirely to me. That perspective has been earned, not read, not borrowed, earned through experience that left marks. So when I speak now, I speak plainly. I no longer perform uncertainty I do not feel. I no longer apologize for seeing things the way I genuinely see them. I hold my opinions with open hands, willing to learn, always willing to listen, but no longer willing to pretend they do not exist just to keep a room comfortable. A man who has lived this long and still cannot speak his truth has not grown wiser with age. He has only grown more afraid. And I refuse to let fear have the last word in the time I have left. For most of my life, I treated joy like a reward system, like something that had to be earned before it could be enjoyed. Like happiness was standing at the end of a very long hallway, and I would get there eventually. Once the bills were settled, once the children were raised and stable, once the hardest responsibilities had finally loosened their grip on my shoulders. I kept telling myself the same quiet lie so many people tell themselves without even realizing it. I told myself, not yet, soon, when things calm down, when life gets easier, when I finally deserve it. And the years kept moving, the way years do, without asking permission, without slowing down to check whether you were ready. I look back now and I can see all the joy I postponed. The trips I said I would take someday, the hobbies I set aside because they felt indulgent when there was serious work to be done, the afternoons I could have spent doing absolutely nothing of consequence, just sitting in the warmth of an ordinary day. And instead I filled them with worry about things that, from where I am standing right now, barely even mattered. I was so focused on building a life that I kept forgetting to actually live inside it. That is a grief that does not announce itself loudly. It arrives quietly, in the stillness of an evening when the house is empty, and you realize that the life you were always preparing to enjoy has already mostly happened. But here is the thing about reaching 75 with your eyes open. You stop grieving what is behind you, and you start becoming fiercely protective of what is still ahead, however much that is, however long. You stop treating joy like a destination, and you start recognizing it in the smallest, most ordinary moments that you once walked past without a second glance. The garden in the early light, the smell of rain on dry ground, a conversation that goes nowhere useful but feels like everything, a song that finds you in the kitchen and makes you stop moving for just a moment. These are not small things disguised as life. These are life itself, showing up in the only form it ever actually takes. The present moment, right now, this breath, this light, this ordinary, irreplaceable day. Joy is not a finish line. It never was. It is a practice, a daily, deliberate, quietly radical act of choosing to be present in the life you are actually living rather than the one you are still waiting to begin. You have waited long enough. We both have. Thank you for walking this journey with me today. Subscribe to Evergreen Wisdom and never stop choosing the life that is still beautifully, completely yours. When everything in life has been shared, divided, given away, or taken by time, one thing remains standing, untouched and entirely yours. It is not your house. It is not your name. It is not even your memories, because those live in others too. The one thing that truly belongs to you is how you choose to live the years you still have left. Not for applause, not for approval, not to prove anything to anyone, just fully, quietly, and finally, for yourself. You have earned that, every single day of it.